thank you very much for this thought-provoking statement. And let us continue in our sequence of keynote speakers. Our next speaker is Professor Jean-Pierre Bourguignon. Since 2014, he is the president of the European Research Council, and he'll speak to us now. And I gave some advanced praise, which is frequently done in Germany. We do it full-heartedly to this institution. And we may want to hear about the secret of success and further development.
Thank you so much. So it's a great honor for me to address this summit today. This is always an important event in the research calendar. Germany accounts for around 30% of all the research expenditures in the 28 EU countries. So even in a normal year, the decisions you make in this country resonate far beyond Germany. But as you know, this year's summit is likely to have even more resonance. One reason making it exceptional is the fact that in just 2 weeks' time, on the 2nd of May, the European Commission will announce its proposal for the next long-term EU budget for the period 2021-2027. Shortly afterwards, on 6th of June, as Robert Jan mentioned to us, the Commission will publish its proposal for the next EU Research and Innovation Framework Programme, FP9. A great occasion to look forward and decide where to go and also how to organize ourselves. So where are we? I think Robert Jan already told us. We're living in a critical moment for the support of research. Latest figures show that between 2012 and 2016, the EU research intensity, public and private, has fluctuated around 2% of GDP. That is more or less stagnated. This remains well below the corresponding ratios recorded in 2015 in Japan, United States, South Korea, and Israel. Israel is at the moment almost leading the world with 4.3% investment. At the same time, the R&D intensity in China surpassed that of the EU 28, as Robert Jan mentioned, with the Chinese research and development expenditures equivalent to 2.1% of the GDP. So we know where we Europeans stand as far as the investments, both private and public, go. Some European countries like Germany are up to the competition. Others still need to make considerable progress to reach a satisfactory level in view of the competition. The current situation is therefore not ideal. And with the rising competition from Asia, uncertainties created by Brexit, and some persisting effects of the debt crisis. Nevertheless, there are some reasons for optimism. Important actors from the public and private sectors have said they are looking forward to significant increases in the EU research and innovation budget. Likely, difficult negotiations lie ahead. They cannot lead us in the right direction if the strengths and weaknesses of Europe in the international environment are not properly estimated and ways of improving the situation duly identified. This is one more reason, if we want Europe to be successful, to leave no room for complacency. Indeed, now more than ever, we in the research community must show the European added value of acting together. And this must be done on the basis of results. You will not be surprised if I start with what the European Research Council has achieved in its first 11 years as a key component of the EU's framework programs. The ERC has reached very high goals, showing that Europe, when it acts boldly, can be a successful and mind-changing actor. The ERC is the #1 funder in the world if one measures the quality of the research funded on the basis of highly cited scientific publication. As of 2015, ERC grantees have contributed more than 6% of the top cited articles by EU-based authors, while the ERC has funded less than 1% of the researchers based in Europe. And this is why only with only 1% of the research budget. Research funded by ERC has led to major advances at the frontier of knowledge. Ex post analysis of completed ERC project, an initiative of the ERC Scientific Council, shows this year after year. Indeed, more than 70% of the ERC project achieved a breakthrough, thank you very much, or a major scientific advance. Last, but certainly not least, ERC-funded research has set a clear, inspirational target for frontier research across Europe, pushing applicants to develop their most ambitious and daring ideas and institutions to support them. The ERC has become a reference for quality evaluation, clearly a key asset for research having a long-term impact. Still, one should never forget that research and innovation form an ecosystem involving top-down and bottom-up approaches, long-term basic recurrent support and competitive funding, as well as career paths and opportunities. For sure, we cannot say if one part of the garden is fine, we need only to tend to the other part. A constant attention has to be paid to the system as a whole because of its intricate inner exchanges that make it effective and cohesive. And the two components, research and innovation, have to nurture each other through radically new paradigms in one direction, through challenging questions leading to new inquiries in the other. Now, some say that Europe has a low capacity to develop radical innovation as a result of some strange paradox. Actually, if one looks closely, Europe tends to be more competitive in traditional areas of slow growth and not so competitive in areas linked to hot technological topics. This is confirmed by a recent analysis considering 14 fast-evolving technological topics from among a large number of research fields, by their high citation rates and current technological importance. The US has far outperformed the EU on the former, especially if the UK was not included. Could this mean that the top-down strategic planning in place in so many countries in Europe is not nurtured in the right way by the truly paradigm change developed by researchers and entrepreneurs at their own initiative? In my opinion, some thought should be put in that, as too many countries have put too much weight on the top-down approach and not placed enough trust in the scientific community. This ecosystem is indeed multi-layered and depends critically on actions taken also at the national level as well as in the private sector. And we should not think of it as only a relationship between the national and the EU level. We also need to consider the whole range of cross-border links that exist in our globalized world. Science is highly integrated at the global level, but even when we consider close-to-market innovation, then the links are also clear. It is very rare that an entirely new technology is brought to market in one step. More normally, an innovation consists of a novel combination of technologies, some based on radically new scientific paradigms. Or a breakthrough, example in material sciences, allows a new wave of incremental innovations to existing technologies and new combinations of them. Think of smartphones or autonomous vehicles. And nearly always, these different technologies will have been developed at different times in many different locations across the world. So a successful national or EU-wide innovation system will be one that is best integrated into the global research and innovation system. The level of support to research and innovation given at EU level is presently only about 10% of the total public spending in Europe. Hence, the duty of all of us who have responsibilities at European and national levels to find optimal combination of strategies, each taking advantage of the available respective means of action. The EU provides a wonderful platform only if its programs are deemed fit for these purposes, and the scientific community must make its voice heard to help achieve that. The ERC represents a clear example of added value at European level. By running pan-European calls for proposals, it challenges researchers and institutions across Europe to give their best, to better organize themselves, and to push the frontiers. Prior to the creation of the ERC, Europe was lacking a comprehensive, strict ex-ante competitive selection process at continental level, capable of challenging the research system in its diversity and complexity. But it does more. The ERC Scientific Council has already taken a very successful first step in establishing proof-of-concept grants for ERC grantees, who along the way of developing their research see the possibility of getting closer to market or of addressing societal challenges. Almost 800 grants have already been provided, and they led to the creation of more than 100 startups. This is, of course, not the core of the mission of the ERC, but shows that the connectivity of research to innovation, and in particular to disruptive innovation, is a reality even in the minds of researchers. This brings me to my second key point. Since I look on my current function, I've been very struck by the way with the way policymakers of all nationalities often talk about research. Their focus is, in my opinion, too much on structures and systems, on strategic programming, on critical mass and short-term priorities. This leads them to miss that the most essential contribution comes from researchers and the entrepreneurs themselves, who make things work in their diversity. Therefore, for me, a critical factor to enhance the performance of the European research system is that enough room be given to initiatives coming from a variety of highly motivated people, attracting some of them and retaining others in Europe, whether researchers or entrepreneurs. And first and foremost, the key is to convince the most talented young people to consider research as a possible career, in academia as well as in industry. Europe must be, as Commissioner Moedas and the ERC champion, open to the world. As far as the ERC is concerned, the facts are as follows. In 2017, more than 500 applications were submitted by nationals of non-European research areas, representing about 10% of all candidates. And now, if you look at the people who got grants, 647 grants out of the more than 8,000 given by the ERC have been awarded to non-euro nationals. Yet, Europe has to care about the right basic conditions for researchers, as without them, the long-term quality of research is affected. It is also a key condition for researchers based in Europe to feel comfortable about developing their research where they are. Anybody entering a demanding working environment such as ours wants to be assured that there is a chance of a career, of advancement, of some reward. This is a challenge for all of us, and for sure the national and regional structures have a very big role to play in making the right offers available. Finding the optimal way of helping countries still struggling to achieve that is vital. Almost surely, it has to be a combination of measures and commitments coming from all levels: global, bilateral, multilateral, and local. So let me conclude. We are currently living in a period of considerable political uncertainty. Times of uncertainty make some decisions makers timid, but such times can also open the way to bold decisions. I very much hope that, as hinted in the announcement of this conference, you will make strong and courageous decisions, and not only for Germany, but also with your European partners in all their diversity, for the sake of all, our future generations, which I'm sure will contribute to an ambitious Europe, which is the only setting offering the variety of tools required by the intense international competition Europeans face. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Bourguignon, and thank you for also appealing to us to use a period of uncertainty to come up with bold initiatives and not sort of go in the other direction. Let me now invite our second speaker from the outer circle, Professor Oliver Günther, who is a professor and president at the University of Potsdam, to give us his view of the European issues we're talking about. Professor Günther.
Thank you, Dietmar Hauff, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I could only join this conference at lunchtime today, and I was a bit surprised at the somber mood that was communicated by some of the speakers in the first session. Mr. Baumann of Bayer said he does not see how a company like Bayer could be founded and how it could thrive today in Germany or Europe. Mr. Eckert said publicly funded research is essentially useless and a waste of money. Well, it's not only because I'm a university president and because I'm a convinced European that I dare to disagree. I think we've come a long way. I think there's still a lot to do, but I think the direction in which we're going in Germany and Europe is the right one. I think a company like Bayer could come up today out of the existing startup ecosystem. I do think publicly funded research is a very good source also of income, even for a company like Eckert & Ziegler. I used to own some of their stock. It was a very good investment, and I think a lot of their products are based on basic research. So I think we are on a good trajectory. And if you look outside here, and if you look at the startup scene that we have here in Berlin and Potsdam, but also overall in Europe, it's wonderful, and we will see many successful companies coming out of this ecosystem. Even today, when we look at the revenue that's being generated by university startups in the Berlin-Brandenburg area, we're looking at an annual revenue of 1.6 billion euros every year. That's almost exactly the annual budget of the Berlin-Brandenburg University. So even though there's no direct correlation, of course, it shows you that we're not completely on the wrong track. What needs to be done? Well, let me give you a little bit of my background. I'm leading a university a little bit outside Berlin, 20,000 students. We have always been very involved in promoting startups and transfer activities out of our university. We have about 40 to 50 companies coming out of the University of Potsdam every year. Of course, not all of them survive, but some of them are already quite successful in contributing to the general welfare. By the way, not only in some areas we're strong in, computer science and health sciences, also in some other areas like law or humanities. That brought us to a kind of position among the top 5 to 10 universities in terms of technology transfer activities. We're proud of that, and it helps us in our political communication. We invest a lot in talent scouts. We have special people who go to the professors, to the young researchers to check what they're working on and to see which of these ideas would possibly be suited for a startup, because we know the old idea of technology transfer, some ideas are being developed in some university, and somebody picks them up, somebody else picks them up and turns them into a product that does not really work. The best way to do technology transfer is to have the same people developing ideas, getting some funding, and then moving into the private sector, and that's what we try to push. We cooperate very closely with city and state government, very important in Germany. Essential, I would say. We founded a development company together with the city to help startups thrive, to provide space for the startups, and this kind of partnership between politics and research is, I think, also an essential factor. We cooperate, of course, also very closely with the VC scene to help our young researchers to find funding early on. What does that leave for the EU or for large public funding agencies? I think what was quoted before by, I think it was Mr. Smits, who quoted Mr. Riesenhuber, that scale and scope is something where we need this kind of public support. We need public support at the national level. We have wonderful agencies like the DFG, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft. We have ERC. And these organizations are extremely important also for the startup sector. It's not only DARPA that we're missing. When I was a PhD student in the US 30 years ago, some of my funding was DARPA, some of my funding came from DARPA. There was also a lot of bureaucracy. There was also a lot of small-scale thinking. It's not that, and that was in Silicon Valley, by the way, in Berkeley. And it's not that this was all paradise. I think what the Americans maybe do different is the numbers game. Lots and lots of startups are being funded, and there's a big funnel where ideas come in, are being promoted by private investors, partly also by the government, and that kind of numbers game is what we have to play here in Europe as well, because it's impossible to predict early on what's really going to make it. I mean, when I first heard about Facebook, I don't know when it was, 8 years ago, I thought, who could have such a stupid idea, right? Who needs that? And we need to be more courageous in funding lots of unusual ideas, and then luck or serendipity, as the Americans call it, will do the job. So I'm optimistic, and I'm looking forward to the continuation of this discussion. Thank you very much.